Welcome everybody to the Life, Death and Happiness podcast. This podcast is all about real talks with real people. Why? Because some stories just need to be told. In each episode, I will sit down and talk with my guest about how it is to live with an incurable disease or terminal illness. But let me get this straight before we start. This is all about celebrating life. I'm your host, Daniel Cole. Welcome. In this episode, I have the honor of talking to Carl from Michigan. And Carl, can you say hi and tell us a little about yourself?
Oh, hi, Daniel. I'm really excited to be on this podcast. I've been following your podcast since you came out with it, and I've found it really inspirational and really interesting to learn more about the lives, the people that you have on here. But yeah, my name is Kyle Tanner. I'm 24 years old. I was diagnosed with Fanconi Anemia when I was 16 years old. I just graduated college with a bachelor's degree in broadcasting. And I had a bone marrow transplant, actually 2 years ago. So not very long ago where I was coming out of, being in a very medically savvy, I guess, environment. And that's really all was going on in my life for a period of time not too long ago. But now, I got through college and now I'm here.
Yeah. So you have actually managed to go through college afterwards. It's kind of impressive, actually.
Yeah, that was I learned I needed my bone marrow transplant during my senior year of college, first semester senior year of college. So I had a good part of it already done. And when I learned that I would have to be taking, at least a year off before I could come back and complete my degree. But yeah, there was times when I didn't really know if that was going to be possible. But I kind of in the back of my head, I knew that if I were alive, that I was going to achieve, I was going to do that. I was going to finish what I started because I was too close to the end to not finish it.
Oh, I fully get that part. When were you diagnosed? And what was the diagnosis you had at that time?
I was first diagnosed when I was 16 years old. They came about the diagnosis from a kidney stone. So I had a kidney stone. It put me in the hospital. They did the blood test and stuff like that. And they were able to tell, something was off in my blood counts. Something just wasn't right. And from there, I got forwarded to a hematologist at the University of Michigan, where I'm from. And they did more testing, and that, inevitably led to FA. But it wasn't, like most people's story, it wasn't like an immediate, we figured out what it was. Because a lot of physicians and doctors, that's not the first thing they're looking for when they see off blood counts.
It's suddenly that they start looking for a rare disease. They usually go for the normal stuff that they know about, and yeah.
Yep, and that's at first they thought I had leukemia, and then they thought, maybe it's like aplastic anemia. That's the things they were really looking at, and they really kind of told us what they thought it was probably going to end up. But Fanconi anemia was on the board at one point of what they were thinking, that they were going to test for, but it wasn't something that was at the forefront of what they thought it would be.
Okay, so you was diagnosed with Fanconi anemia. And what was the immediate reaction from both you and your family?
I think it's even hard because, it really wasn't that long ago where I was diagnosed. But I knew I was going to be diagnosed with something and that something was going to be off. And I knew nothing about Fanconi anemia, not even when I was told the diagnosis, even beforehand that, it could be a possibility it was on the board, but I didn't research that disease, didn't look into that. So it still came as a surprise to me. And, but my parents, I think they may have known more about it because their reaction, I think with any parent was a lot more they were encapsulated in the emotion. I could see it, on their face that this was a very grim diagnosis. And I think my reaction was more geared at looking at the other people around me and seeing what their reaction to it was. And that's what I was reacting to. And I knew it was bad, but I've heard you say it before too. It was kind of like an out-of-body experience. I really didn't feel like I was really present in there to feel all of it. Like I almost, as a defense mechanism, my body may have somehow like disassociated my mind from it and the implications of it, which I didn't know the implications at that time anyway. But it felt very surreal. You know, it kind of felt like everything slowed down during that time frame when I was told. Yeah.
Yes, I think that people who haven't tried to get diagnosed that is on this level, that is so difficult when you sit there and somebody's telling you that you have this and this disease, even if it's cancer or it's a Fanconi Anemia or some of the other stuff that can happen to you. I mean, it's just surreal in so many ways, because I think for a lot of us, this is something, it's very classic, it's very cliche. It's something that would happen to someone else. I mean, you never expect it to happen to you. That's just...
Yeah, yep, exactly. And I think, you know, a lot of people carry that with them, that, you know, those type of bad things aren't going to happen to me. The type of bad things that completely, you know, shift your world or way of thinking. We don't really expect to have those things happen to us. You know, that's what we see in movies, or we see in articles written about other people, or, you know, just stories that, yeah, we don't really think that we're going to experience that or have any idea how to feel when we do experience it. We're not equipped to deal with that type of diagnosis. I don't think really anybody is.
Agree. Let me ask you a question, because I met you, like, I think it was 3 years ago at something called Camp Sunshine in Maine. And back then, I was like, oh, okay, you're a pretty fresh guy. You were very different. You seem very different from a lot of the people and the kids who grew up with Fanconi Anemia and all these things. So it was also, it was not totally new for you back then, but it was still new-ish.
Yeah, that was...
So I wonder, how was your life up until you got this diagnosis?
It was pretty normal. Like that's how I would explain it. Maybe I didn't think it was normal at the time that I was in it. But yeah, I grew up, you know, with my two parents. I had two sisters that I grew up with. And I also have a half brother, but I didn't grow up with him. But, you know, I played outside a lot. I played lots of sports. I loved sports. I was very active. You know, I had really good friends that I was able to, you know, spend time and hang out with. And my house was like the get together house. Like whenever I had friends that I'd hang out with, they would always come to my house. My house was like the place to be. And I came out, like, I figured out later in life that the reason it was like that is because my parents, they thought, you know, well, if he's going to get into trouble, at least we know he's here. And at least we can, like, have a little bit of control and say in what he's doing. So they always let my friends come over and let my friends hang out at our house because they liked that. Or my mom at least liked that control that she had to be able to kind of monitor me. But
that's actually pretty smart.
Yeah, that was before I was even diagnosed, though, that she was like that. And she was always very protective. And I grew up, even though I think it was somewhat normal, I did have my health problems. I seemed to get sick more often than most kids. I think I had pneumonia once. And I was kind of a hypochondriac. I always thought medically that there was something going on with me. And sometimes that would lead to like anxiety or panic attacks when I was younger, because I thought, you know, something was wrong with me.
And you were probably right looking back. Yeah.
And, you know, I kind of was, but yeah, you know, getting the diagnosis of FA, I felt like kind of, in a way, validated my concerns. But I don't think that it's necessarily a good thing to live like that, and how I was living, and just the fear that I lived with a lot of times that there was something wrong with me.
But if I might be wrong here, but I talked to some of the other people in the podcast about it. You get to know your own body in a different way when you are having some kind of life-challenging disease. And my thought when you told me this is that maybe on a subconscious level, you maybe still have this, this feeling of being in control of your body. I mean, it's like a defense mechanism we do have in our bodies. I mean, to protect ourselves. So maybe you still had that, even though you wasn't aware of having this disease.
Yeah, it was almost sort of like of an intuition, thinking that. But everybody around you doesn't believe what's going on with you, because they have the same thing happen to them sometimes, where they think something's wrong with them. They look it up, and it turns out to be nothing. But with the FA diagnosis, that kind of validated that. But over time, I've learned a lot more, just about how to be in tune with my body and discerning the mental exaggerations of a symptom, and deciding if it's really right to devote my mental energy to it. So that's what I've been, learning after all these years since I've been diagnosed, trying to become more in tune with my body and know when something, okay, this is actually a problem that I need to address. And then one of it where it's just like, I'm just worrying because that's natural for me to do. But it's been a learning process in that way.
Oh, believe so. I have to ask you about your bone marrow transplantation that you went through, because when I met you, you haven't had it yet.
Yep.
The first time around. And I met you, and we talked and had a lot of fun. I thought you were a great guy. And then we met like a year and a half later in Atlanta, I think it was. Was it Atlanta?
Yeah, it was in Atlanta. Yep. It almost feels like it was longer than a year and a half, but like maybe it wasn't, because time for me, wasn't the same anymore.
Yeah. I was really thinking when I said it was only 1.5 years after. I think it was, but and I kind of when I walked down at the hotel and you were suddenly there, I didn't actually recognize you to begin with, and I felt so bad about it afterwards because. But because so much have happened to you, you've been through so much. So it wasn't actually. Was my wife was like, why didn't you say hi? I was like, hi, it's Kyle, and I had to turn around. I was like, oh, I felt so bad. I don't even think I mentioned it to you that day, but I just in my stomach. I was like, oh man, how you doing? but
yeah,
it kind of tells the story of you've been through so much. Can you get into a little about about this whole process of going into a bone marrow transplantation, and maybe explain people a little about what it is and what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't blame you for not recognizing me. I mean, even I would have, with people in the not sensation, but like thought of body dysmorphia, where I would look at myself in the mirror sometimes and not like I knew it was me there. But because of all the drugs that I had been on, all of what mostly caused me to look different was a drug called prednisone, which causes you to retain fluid like crazy. Like, I would gain during my transplant process, and when I went on prednisone, I would gain 10 pounds in a week sometimes. That's how much my weight would fluctuate because of this drug and because of the large doses I was on. But before I had my bone marrow transplant, I didn't understand the physical, the major physical implications of what having FA what it can do. What does it actually mean in some cases? And the major physical challenges that I had, they didn't present themselves until I had my bone marrow transplant. And having the BMT taught me how bad things can really get physically. The feeling of not having any platelets, the feeling of like having, I had meningitis at one point. Lost all my hair, which, is going to happen when you get chemo and radiation. Yeah. Just all these different things that happen to you when you go through a bone marrow transplant that really make you feel the implications of the disease. Like before it was all, just a mental experience. And then now with the bone marrow transplant that I had, it became more than just a mental experience, but things were manifesting themselves physically. And it just made it feel a lot more real. Like at that point, I kind of knew how serious FA was and how serious it could be when I had my transplant. Because my transplant, well, first of all, it didn't. If you want me, I can get into kind of like the story of how my transplant went.
Yeah, please do so. Yeah, but just go with what you were saying.
But so the first. I mean, you do the chemo and radiation workup. I had my transplant at University of Minnesota under Dr. John Wagner, great doctor. but we don't have to talk too much about that. But right when the day that I had my received my transplant, I had it done, and they told me it was going to last. It would probably last a few minutes to maybe up to maybe 20 or 30 minutes the max. And I had my transplant, and it lasted, which some people listening might already know this from other people, but it's pretty much a glorified blood transfusion. The transplant literally is very uneventful. It's not like a big crazy thing. It's like you're getting a blood transfusion, if anybody's ever had one of those. It's very simple. It's very, maybe not simple, but it feels, just very easy. And it went in over the period of about 45 seconds to a minute. It lasted, and I'm like, that's it? And they're like, yeah, that's it. But like, to me, like, something just wasn't right there. And the next morning, the doctor that was on, that was there for rounds that week came into my room and explained to me that I didn't get enough cells, that maybe I had gotten like 1/10 of what they really wanted me to get. And that,
okay. So, I thought you were like more like surprised that the window was so quickly when getting but it was actually because you felt it in your body immediately.
Well, it's because it didn't last long. It lasted 30 or 45 seconds, and I felt from what they told me that it was going to last a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
But right after that, they try to reassure me that everything that's fine. Sometimes they are that fast. But the next morning, the doctor came in and told me that I didn't receive enough cells, and I think they knew that then when they were giving it to me. Because how could you not know that I wasn't getting enough cells? But they figured out that I didn't get enough, and they told me that they didn't think that I could really have a successful transplant unless I was able to get more cells.
Okay.
And at this point, I had already went through chemo and radiation, and so they pretty much said two options. They said, A, we can contact the donor again and see if they'll be willing to donate again, but this time peripheral blood stem cells, which is different from bone marrow, from them and like getting it out of your back and sedating you.
Okay.
Peripheral blood stem cells, they get it through your blood and they filter the stem cells out. But they said they can recontact the donor and see if he'll donate again, or two, they can try to find cord blood matches for me to add onto my transplant. And at this point, time is kind of ticking. I mean, my body is not producing any of the blood cells.
Time is
like
crucial,
that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, yeah, because I already had the chemo and radiation, and my body needed to start producing, white blood cells and these things to start repairing itself. And they weren't confident that this would happen unless I got these extra cells. So at that point, it was a waiting game to see if the donor would be willing to donate again, or if that they would have to search for those cord blood cells, which I knew at that point they were already searching for, just in case the donor wouldn't be able to give again or didn't want to. Thankfully, I think it was 10 days later, I had my second transplant on February 17th, which was 10 days from my first transplant. And was it? Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Okay.
And thankfully he decided, it was a guy, a 21-year-old male at that time from Germany. They contacted him, and he decided that he would do it again. And that was such, the 10 days up to that waiting period was actually pretty weird. I could tell that it was much harder for my mom to deal with that waiting period. And when I heard, those words that I didn't get enough cells and that I had two options, I relinquished control of the situation. I knew that, whatever I was going to do, wouldn't make, a lot of what was going to happen to me was out of my control at that point. It was all up to the doctors to be able to get those stem cells or be able to find those cord blood
that time there ain't much you can do about it anyway. I mean, you're laying there and it's a waiting game for you. And
and it was weirdly, it doesn't sound like this would happen, but I actually had a sense of relief when I relinquished, pretty much said that it's uncertain what's going to happen. And I completely gave up the control. And at that point, it was almost kind of like I relaxed because I stopped trying to control everything. That was a very different experience from what, one would expect to happen. But and thankfully I was able to get those cells and continue going on with the journey through the transplant. And I was able to get out at day plus 26, which is relatively, that's not bad. I mean, that's actually pretty early where I got the new cells, and then they started to come in, and they were able to see my ANC was good enough to go out, maybe not out in public, but go back I went to the Ronald McDonald House there in Minneapolis.
Okay, yeah.
And I was able to go there, and everything was going along pretty well. I actually felt pretty good. I was even exercising at that point. I was doing my own exercises. I was already ready to start getting my body back to what I thought that it was at previously. And I think I started doing that a little too soon. It's not like I went.
You think so? After 26 days?
I didn't go out in like public and parade around or anything. I always wore my mask and things like that. But at about day plus 40, I started getting really severe headaches, like really debilitating headaches that would make it so I really wouldn't be able to do anything. And I was also losing weight really fast because I mean, when you have a headache, you're not very hungry.
Oh, definitely.
But they sent me back into the hospital to try to figure this out, and they're like, we're going to do a spinal tap to try to, because we think this is what it might be associated with. Maybe we can figure out something from your spinal fluid. And at that point, they were able to find out I had viral meningitis, which is very dangerous for a person with an immune system to have.
Oh,
and, yeah. But at my mindset at that time, I still was in like this mind state of kind of things that, they weren't in my control. And I'm just like, oh, well, that's unlucky, but I'm not really surprised that it happened. And, we treated the viral meningitis. I was able to get over the meningitis. I got out of the hospital again after they put me back inpatient for 10 days.
But that part alone is a very tough fight for most people.
Yeah, and that's what people have told me. It's not like it wasn't tough for me, but my mind state was just in a place like that. Whatever was coming at me, I was going to face it, and I wasn't going to face it like a fight, but I was going to face it like this is here, and I'm going to make the best out of my situation, mindfully of what I'm thinking, because that's the only thing I had control over. The only thing I had control over was how I looked at a situation. And that's kind of, I guess, where I put my control at, is I didn't put a bunch of time in worrying or, ruminating over things. I had kind of just, I guess people say, like, live in the now or be present. I was doing that, but I wasn't consciously thinking, oh, I should be thinking this. And that's just what my body did. That's what my mind did. It went to that place of just trying to be present every moment. And that's how I was living during my transplant. But to get back to what happened after my viral meningitis, I'd gotten over my viral meningitis. But from what I think and what my theory is, that in order to treat the viral meningitis, they had to kind of wean back my immunosuppressants and maybe like bump up, different things to help fight the meningitis, the viral meningitis. And in doing so, they had left me open to something called graft versus host disease, or where your immune system starts, attacking itself. And
just for the listener, GVH, graft versus host, that is something that a lot of people who have a transfusion like this, it happens to most people, and it's like the nightmare for all of us. I mean, you're getting a transfusion, a bone marrow transfusion, and transplantation, and you're really hoping that that's it. After this, I will get better. And then GVHD can come in, and usually with a right hook to the chin. And but you can explain that better, just to give people understanding. This happens to a lot of people when you will go through a transplantation afterwards.
Yeah, and they tell you a little bit of graft versus host disease is a good thing. A little bit is, because I actually did have a little bit of it on my skin during my transplant, but it wasn't worrisome. It was like, oh, this is good. This means your body is reacting how we expect it to react, and that means the process that's going on is actually working. And they're like, okay, so this, a little bit of GVHD is good. But this GVHD that happened at around day plus 60, I think, 60-something, it was not a good kind of graft versus host disease. The symptoms that led up to it is where I was going to the bathroom probably, 15, 20 times a day. Like, I'm not talking number one either. I'm talking number two. Like, it was just coming, like about 20 times a day. I was losing weight rapidly. And it was like maybe 4 or 5 days, maybe more than that, before the doctors were really like, yeah, we should bring you inpatient. And now looking back at it, you know, it was pretty obvious I should have been inpatient pretty fast. But they weren't able to tell how severe it was until they were able to really, like, look at me when I came in and then also see my weight numbers. They seen that I was dropping weight, like, rapidly. I think the latest I got was like 91, 92 pounds.
Wow.
And I'd lost it very fast. And at that point, you know, they put me back inpatient again, and they're like, okay, we think it's probably like C. diff or something, which is kind of common after transplant. I don't know what the real name for it is, but yeah, it's C. diff. It's pretty much like a bacterial, like, imbalance in your stomach or something like that.
Okay.
But they were able to push that off and figure out it wasn't that. And I think that's when they started to think about, okay, let's check to see if this is graft versus host disease, because it targets different areas in your body. And, you know, the skin, it can target organs. In my case, it was targeting my lower bowels, so it was targeting my lower intestines. And they were able to do a colonoscopy to confirm that it was graft versus host disease. And what I didn't know about graft versus host disease previous to this is that there's actually stages. They grade grades. So they grade GVHD on a scale of 1 to 4, 4 being the most severe.
Okay, yeah.
And they didn't tell me what my grade was, but I was able to tell through, because I was able to look at the results from the colonoscopy and then also read the doctor's notes and what they were writing about it and what they seen, and that I was graded with a grade 3 out of 4 graft versus host disease of the lower intestine. And that, I think just knowing that, I remember when I read that, because they put me on really high dose steroids, prednisone, which is what caused me, to kind of not look like myself. But in essence, that drug probably saved my life, because what it does is it's an anti-inflammatory. So it was able to calm down the inflammation and calm down the response of my immune system attacking my lower bowels. So they put me on copious amounts of prednisone, really high doses.
And it was so important when they started using that for bone marrow transplantation back then. Yeah, it was so vital then that they discovered that how well that worked for us.
Yeah, and I can believe that. And some people, there's a percentage of people that don't respond to it, and then if you don't respond, there's a few other options. But I mean, I didn't know those options at that time. But I also went on, which I have no idea how it affected me or if it made me get better faster. But I went on a drug called Pregnol, which was originally intended to use for female fertility, and I was getting these Pregnol injections in the back of my arm because they pretty much asked me if I wanted to go through with this because they were doing a study. So they put me in a trial, and I'm part of a case study for the Pregnol to see if it really helps people respond in GVHD cases. And I don't know if that article's published or what they were able to figure out. But at that time, my situation was pretty dire in that I had a pretty severe case, and that whatever I could possibly use to maybe help me to get over, not maybe get over, but, put me in a better place faster, I was willing to do. So I allowed them to do that, and I got the Pregnol injections for, I don't think it was like a month, a few times a week. And I don't know how much that helped, but maybe when that study comes out, we'll be able to tell if it actually did. But I was able to, slowly over time, and it took a long time, get over the bowel problems associated with the GVHD. Not without, a plethora of side effects, the weight gain, the muscle deterioration that comes with it, the mood swings. I mean, when I was on prednisone at around day 80 through like 130, I was sleeping maybe 2 to 3 hours a night max because I was on the high dose, and it produces cortisol in your body, and that cortisol keeps you up. So I wasn't sleeping. I was just, a lot of times I was researching actually, which was like a transition from that state of being accepting uncertainty and, being okay with everything that was going on and relinquishing control. But I almost had like a switch get flipped in my head. And I think some of it was from a drug-induced state from the prednisone that kind of made me manic. And I was just researching. I remember I was taking a class at the time, an online class from my college at
while
that same
going through
time.
all this? Wow.
Yes, while that was happening. And I think I signed up when I was actually doing pretty good after my transplant, and we thought, that I would be okay to do this online class. And the class was called Death and Dying. and the class was about learning about how other cultures treat death and how the outlook of the I guess the North American, how we are in the United States, how our outlook on death differs from other cultures. And I actually found that to be, very helpful and very comforting at that time, learning about
I could imagine that, yeah.
And learning about something that I felt like I was really close to. I remember researching and learning about like the statistics of, what's the chances that I'll live another year. I remember researching that with grade 3 GVHD of the lower colon, and I was able to find a study. It was actually from the University of Minnesota that I think it might have been a little dated though, maybe 5 to 10 years old, maybe a little more, but that showed the statistics showed that you had a 50% chance of survival 1 year out. And I remember that really affected me, just to seeing that number, even though it was just a number. Us as humans, we tend to really look at statistics and hard facts and science as being.
But I think it's natural because we have to grab onto something. We have to feel this control you talked about earlier, and knowledge is. It feels like you have some kind of control. At least you know what's going on, instead of it's just something I mean, to begin with, we know nothing about these kind of things. We learn as we go, because we are in the middle of a dire situation, and like you try to study and get some more information. So I think it's natural, actually.
Yeah, and I think so too. And I think sometimes it can be detrimental, maybe. But in my case, at that time, I felt that it was imperative that I learn, and I don't regret doing what I did. I would learn, go and try to learn as much as I could about whatever was going on with me, because I knew that the doctors, they have many cases to be looking at during the day. Many. They can't just focus on one person. And since what was happening was being done to me, I can focus on myself. I can put all the time and energy into researching what's going on with me, and maybe I could help them. Maybe I could give them, even though some doctors don't want to be told what to do by any means, but it felt empowering, like you said, too, to feel in control a little bit. Like I remember looking at my blood counts and learning what each thing meant, and being able to look for certain trends and stuff like that, because I felt that it was imperative, that I knew doctors made mistakes. I had seen it done, really. I'd seen doctors make mistakes, and I knew how human they were. So I thought, I maybe would better my chance of survival if I researched all the stuff, if I learned what each blood count meant and things like that, so I could bring it up to them if I seen something and maybe they just brushed over it. So yeah, there was a sense of control that I felt when I was in that mind state, and after I had the GVHD, because before I had the GVHD, I might have been interested in what drug they were giving me at a certain time, but I didn't learn about like what that drug does or what it means, or what blood counts, what these mean, like physically what they mean. So it wasn't until I had the GVHD and I felt pressed to learn these things, and that's
can I ask you regarding that, when you read that there's like you said 50% chance of surviving this, did you talk to anybody about it, or did you how did you deal with that information?
I remember telling my mom.
Oh, you
which
did?
is like the last person you'd want to tell. But I didn't really have any, like, in person, I didn't have many people to talk to. But, I was kind of angry at that point, too. I was kind of angry that they didn't tell me these things, that they didn't tell me my grade of GVHD, that I felt like, they were, the doctors, they were kind of withholding information from me purposely to maybe protect me, that they thought that they were protecting me, but I'm the type of person that likes to know every little thing that's going on with me, good or bad. So it kind of angered me. And I was kind of angry that they didn't tell me my grade of GVHD and kind of told me the outlook. But I mean, really, I think if I was a doctor, maybe I wouldn't tell the person either. But
it's always a tough choice, because, I mean, I would like for the doctors to always tell me exactly what I'm facing, because then I can handle it. And I've talked to a lot of other people with Fanconi Anemia and cancer, and in different stages, and a lot of us feel that way. But in reality, we also know, as you mentioned here, that the doctors see a lot of patients, and they also have the experience that many people can't take these kind of informations. So they try to sugarcoat it a bit, or at least not tell everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see like how if someone's never been diagnosed with a major medical thing, how imaginatively they would think, if I was diagnosed with that, what would I do? They would probably, they come up with this elaborate thing in their head that, they would probably freak out and probably, it'd be the end of their life. But, since we have actually had that said to us, the diagnosis, we've learned that you can live with this. Like you can live with it, because what else do you do? That's your option, is that you live with it. And
it's not much of a choice. Either you learn to live with it or you give up.
Yeah, and that's what does give up look like? That's hard for me to imagine. I know some people might be able to imagine it, but for me there was only one thing, and that was just to keep on moving,
of course,
forward. Yeah. But I think after the GVHD, I did have a plethora of other diagnoses that came about that were usually stemmed from the treatment they used to treat me. So, so hard, because they had to treat me right then, and they had to give me high doses of different drugs. So I felt a lot of the physical manifestations of that. Like I had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I remember being diagnosed with that from the prednisone.
Oh.
I was also eating like crazy. After I'd been diagnosed with GVHD, I was NPO, like no food by mouth, for a couple weeks, I think. And that drove me, that pretty much drove me crazy. Like being really hungry and not being able to eat, but maybe only eat. Sometimes I was able to eat like rice or like bread, things that they seen as really plain. They called it like the neutropenic diet. And some people do go through that with transplant. Something I don't agree with now that I've had my transplant, and I hope that they change that protocol, because it's really, I felt like it was really detrimental. But I mean, at the time when my stomach was really messed up and like tore to pieces, pretty much that's what it felt like. I was on like a no food by mouth, or bread, or maybe just rice or applesauce, and that drove me crazy, because I was also on high doses of prednisone, and prednisone makes you hungry.
Oh, so that's just the worst combination.
I remember just watching like the Food Network or food channels.
Oh, man.
Which people are like, why would you watch food channels? But that was the way, that was almost like cathartic. That was my way to almost eat.
Shit, it's funny. I know it's not funny, but it's still very funny. I mean, you're sitting there and you're hungry and you can't eat. And then you're watching the food channel just,
Yeah, because to me, like, eating is, it's an innate part of human nature, is that we eat. And I couldn't just not think about eating. I was so hungry that I could not stop thinking about eating, because my stomach was like, we want food. Like, that's what it was telling me. So I was getting this release by watching, like Man versus Food, or Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives and stuff like, different food shows. And that's how I was getting a release, was watching those shows. But that really was torturous, that part. And
I believe so.
Yeah. But I know other people that have went through the same thing, and I know other people that have had it even worse. They've been NPO for 2 months and couldn't eat anything except through like a feeding tube. And, I've heard about, what that has drove them to do. Like it'll literally drive people crazy. And I experienced it for a few weeks, and then it was slowly introducing foods back into my system. But, some people, I've went months, and I can't even imagine that. I can't imagine that after going through it for, a few weeks.
Yeah, but I think it was Alison that talked to about it regarding when you had the mouth cancer. And for us who have had that, we only get these protein drinks for a long time, because we're not able to eat anything else. And it's not the same as not being able to eat at all, but it's still terrible when you love food.
Yeah, it's like, Ensures and Boost. And they've even like, I could say a lot of bad stuff about Ensure and Boost. Like hospitals kind of almost, try to pander them out and like, oh, you should drink this. But really, you look at the back of the ingredients of those things, and they're not good for you. They might give you sustaining, like they might give you those calories. So it's better to have calories than die of starvation. But they have like a lot of chemicals in them and things that our bodies really don't want. But if that's the only thing that you're taking in, I mean, it's good enough to, sustain survival, but it's really not good for you. And, I hope that that hospitals during these transplantation times start looking more into diet and how important it is, and how we can actually get these nutrients when we can eat properly, safely, but also not making it so it's like this is a processed food that doesn't have any bacteria, because our gut does need bacteria. We've learned that the gut microbiome, like that we have bacteria in our stomach that help it move and also affect mentally how we're thinking and how we feel. And getting these chemically, laden foods over and over again, or processed foods, just because they're safe bacterially, they're affecting us, strongly in other areas of our life, mentally, and how our body processes food.
But isn't this part of the Western problem, that we don't think about these things in a holistic way? We only think about, the surgery or whatever it takes, but we don't really consider so much. At least the hospital usually don't consider how much it means. There's also the mental issues, and as you say here, the things you eat. It's all part of the big, what do you call it, a bigger thing. Everything has to work together, mind, body, and soul. But it seems like, I don't know if it's exactly like that in the U.S. I know it's in this part of Europe that they're mostly thinking about, the clean-cut numbers. It's about doing the surgery.
Yeah.
And not really caring too much about everything else. They give you processed food in that situation. How crazy is that when you think about it?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was lucky enough during my transplant and all the time that I was in Minnesota to have integrative therapists. And actually, not very many hospitals do it to the extent that the University of Minnesota, the Children's Hospital, does it. But I had 3 people usually that I worked with: a music therapist, and then 2 other therapists that did massage therapy. They did Reiki, healing touch.
Okay.
I had people that would come in and do all these different therapies with me, like that were addressing the mental, social, and spiritual side of things. And
that's actually very cool. I tried Reiki healing, but I never heard about anybody getting that at a hospital.
Yeah, I did have Reiki while I was in the hospital, and I loved massage therapy. Just think how expensive a massage is, but in the hospital, in that setting, I was able to get it free, and I was able to have it done multiple times a week. So they would be there Monday through Friday, and I liked the weekdays more. I didn't like the weekend because they weren't there. But when they were there, I was able to get massage therapy, music therapy. It literally made my day. That's what I was looking forward to in the hospital, was these integrative therapies. And it helped so much. And I hope that, us as a society, especially Western society, starts to see how important that side of things is, the tender care of another person, mentally, socially, spiritually, whatever you call it, addressing those things in adults too. Because we're doing a lot better job at, addressing children's concerns mentally, socially. We know they're being highly affected by this traumatic experience of being in the hospital. So we're going to do as much as we can to make it fun or more normal to be in the hospital. But they don't do that on the adult side of things. And that's what I was able to see by being in a children's hospital, because I had my transplant done in a children's hospital, in a pediatric hospital. And I knew people that were going through the transplant in the adult hospital. And things weren't the same. Adults don't get treated with the same care and compassion that children do.
That's
but I was lucky
crazy,
enough.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to have that care and compassion because I was in a pediatric hospital, and they had the funds and they had the energy devoted to addressing that side of things.
But big credit to them for actually doing that. I'm impressed when you talk about it. I'd be like, yeah, that's the way to do it.
It was a very eye-opening experience, and I can't imagine going through a transplant again without that help, without the other things that I had, the music therapy, the healing touch, the Reiki, the massage therapy. There were some other therapies too, but I can't remember. But they were all very good and very instrumental in me being mentally more stable and being able to take on each day by doing those things.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. Never heard about that before. It's like, oh man, they should do that everywhere. I had a child psychologist coming in, and somebody should just, make sure that I got up and did a little jumping around and stuff like that while I was at the hospital during my transplantation. I mean, but then again, it's like 200 years ago, so probably things have changed since then.
I did have a PT too. Yeah, I had a physical therapist come in, or someone that just wanted me to get around and move. And I actually didn't like that much because I didn't like being told what to do. I didn't like having someone come in and tell me, hey, you should do this. Like,
why am I not surprised by that?
I didn't like that. But when they came in and, we worked with music or, they did massage therapy or something like that, I really enjoyed that. And I'm not going to, say that PT wasn't important because it is important to move and walk around. I just didn't like being told what to do.
Fully get that.
Yeah.
So when we talk about all this, when did you really start to feel that, okay, I'm actually going to go through this and it's going to be good? I'm going to get out on the other side feeling a lot better.
That took, oh my goodness. Because a lot of the time I was living very presently. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't thinking really far into the future about how I was going to feel later on, or how I was going to be breaking down, or maybe analyzing, you could say, the things that would happen to me while they were happening to me, but in the future, like how I would feel. I was very concerned with, a lot of times what was happening now and what I could be doing now and then to help further helping me get through it. And that's what really helped me get through it, was living so presently and, not thinking about too far into the future or too far into my past or anything like that. But yeah, it was just a certain mind state that I had while I was going through it. And I was also very supported by, those integrative therapists that I was, telling you about. Yeah. And they provided me with a lot of support, and I can't, thank them enough for what they were able to provide me with while I was in the hospital. But, I had things that, that I would turn to. I would, I listened to a lot of music when I was in the hospital. I didn't play any video games. I don't know. I wasn't really into video games at that time. But yeah, it was just a certain mind state, I guess, that I had. If that answers the question, I really wasn't. It wasn't like it kind of naturally came. It wasn't like I had to really think about how I was going to get through all of it. It was just like there was only, one option: either get through it or not get through it. And I planned on getting through it. That's what I planned on. But not saying that state of mind made me get through it.
But what I'm thinking about, when did you realize that the worst part was over?
Dang, it took a long time. Yeah. It took because at first, I thought it was after I was like at day 35 and, I had gotten out of the hospital and I was on the up and, the up and out. Like I was, doing some exercising. Like, I got through my transplant. I thought, at that time, I still had a tough transplant, but I wasn't at all thinking, what was going to happen to me later on in the next month or so. I did not expect that to happen. And, so, after the GVHD and reading those statistics, like I told you about, I wasn't sure when I was going to be able to come out on the other side of it. Because I was still, even today, I still take, 10, 12 medications a day, maybe a little less than that.
Okay, but, that's a lot, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so I still take a lot of things, but it slowly has been things have been coming off. And I think now, because whenever you think that you're in a comfortable position, at least in my experience with me, something, medically usually has happened. So it seems like I never feel completely ahead of things. I feel like I'm learning to live with things and learning to live within them. But as far as getting past everything, I think I still deal with that today. I still think I deal with, the medical complications that, derived from my bone marrow transplant. And it can take people 3, 4, 5 years.
So it's still very real to you. You don't feel like you're past it. You're in the process of getting over it. Yes, that's I don't feel like I'm definitely not through it yet. I'm in a lot better space, a lot better place, but I still, I've had things happen to me even in the past 6 months that were very, very dangerous and, could have turned out bad. So when all this, with all you have been through, I mean, like most of us who have been through a lot of these things, death. I usually talk about that in the podcast because of the name. Surprise! No,
Yeah.
I know you've been listening to the others, but
Yeah.
what thoughts have you had regarding death? I mean, in this situation you have been in, I mean, even though you try to take it day by day,
Yeah.
how much have this been part of your thought or frame?
It has been such a learning experience. There was times when I was 19, 20, 3 or 4 years after diagnosis where I thought I had things figured out. I thought that I had my concrete kind of, not concrete. I was still learning then too. But I thought, I had confronted death in my mind, in that I was, if it were to happen, then I would be ready for it, that I had things figured out. And then, my transplant came and I started to look at things a little bit differently. I mean, death became more real. It became a lot more real. Like before it was all, in my mind. But, then I started to experience things that, that can kill you. And I started looking at things, I guess, a little bit differently. And that also class that I took on death and dying, I think also influenced me to an extent on the way I look at death. Because for, I guess, what we live with every day, most people would consider a nightmare. Like most people,
I think you're right about that.
If you would take like a normal, like, I guess, sane person without like any much health complications, and you were to tell them that they were going to be diagnosed with this disease and that what the outlook and what it looked like, they would be like, that is a nightmare. They're living with the nightmare. But what we've come to realize by living with it, that it isn't a nightmare. It's an anxiety that can get to us, but we live with this, and we live with a more, a more plain to see imminency of death. I guess, like, everybody kind of knows that they're going to die, but we can wake up in the morning and, kind of see our death. Like, we know what probably is going to kill us. And, I mean, it's not a very comforting feeling.
Oh no, definitely not.
Yeah, it can definitely be a bad thing, but it also forces us to confront death at a much earlier time, usually, than other people. And we start to learn about this thought of death. I mean, this is why I say it's a learning experience, because I'm even still learning to this day, my thoughts on death. But
you talked about the class you took. I found that very interesting, actually. That you would dive into something like that because of the situation you're in. I mean,
yeah, and I learned about other cultures and how they treat death and how they see it more as, an inevitability, a celebration of life, I guess, with what happens when you die. But happiness, well, I'm not going to get to happiness yet because that's the other part of it. But I will say that I'm a big fan of the yin and the yang symbol. So, the good within the bad and the good. And I guess I just know that this fear of death and like this how life can be so scary is a natural thing. And instead of, trying to run away from it, which I've done before, trying to distract myself in any way possible. And I think that's how most people do it. Even people that don't live with a rare disease, every day they're usually doing something. They have a technique that they use to almost numb the situation, numb the thought of death, whether it's through substances, people abuse substances, whether it's through work, whether it's through exercise. People, I mean, some of these things are bad for you, and some of these things, people seem to be good for you. But a lot of these people are doing these things, and it helps take them away from death. It helps take them away from the thought of it, at least, almost as kind of a distraction. And I think, just with us having this rare disease, we think about it a lot, maybe more often, but we're also learning how to talk about it and learning how to, I guess, deal with its inevitability. Because some days some days I feel completely fine with with me dying. I'm like, yeah, it's an inevitable thing. I've come to accept it. And then some days, I'm anxious and I'm like, kind of fearful and like almost feel like I can't, I have to live in this comfortable little bubble. But the problem is that bubble becomes not comfortable, and it becomes not comfortable anymore. Or like I'm just sitting there ruminating in that space. And I think that it's really good that we bring up this topic and we talk about it, because everybody, I feel at least everybody, most people, probably 99% of people deal with this struggle, this anxiety of knowing the inevitability of our death, and how we can, in a lot of ways, in a lot of ways hide from it. But I think the best way is to not hide from it, to bring it up like you're doing in this podcast, which is, I think, is probably one of my favorite segments in it, is actually talking about it.
Because it matters to us. I mean, when I got, it's the same situation you were in here, actually. I mean, when you got the GVHD, when I got the cancer, I looked up like 60% of those who start to getting mouth cancers won't be here more than 2 years after. And a nice doctor also told me back then that if you want to do something with your life, do it now. And if you have the chance to, if you're a betting man and you could take, and I could give you 5 years in advance now, you should definitely take that bet. I mean, that's 5 years ago. So how would I not think about death? Of course I will. And even if I don't feel sad, I don't feel I am walking around fearing it all the time. But it has been like a companion for me for a long time. I mean, I know it's going to happen probably sooner than I would like it to be. But as you say, we try to find a way to live with it without it taking over. And maybe it's getting more comfortable for some of us the more we talk about it. I mean, it's going to happen, and it's probably going to be real ugly. But I have to wait to deal with it until I'm there.
Yeah. And I feel like death is also, to a certain extent, it's pushing us. It's pushing us to be as good as we can be, because we know that life is fragile. And I feel that, death is the, what is it called? Memento mori is the reminder that it's there, and that we have this life, and that it's very precious and fragile, and that we should be making the best out of our time as we possibly can. Because, I mean, it's kind of bringing up the point of like how boring and sad may our lives could be if we were immortal. Like if we lived in the same body, in the same like this, and we knew that we were going to live forever and ever and ever and ever, I think our life would get pretty boring. I think that society,
I think you're right.
I think society would kind of deteriorate, because we would get so bored with life. There would be nothing that would be pushing us to accomplish it, because it would just be, we have forever. We have forever to do everything. We'd probably be very lazy, and we wouldn't be pushing ourselves. And
I think you have a good point there. I know I would be lazy as beep if I was in that situation. Probably. No, but I know for a fact that I spent a lot of my life. I did live, and I do think I had a good life, but I wasn't really pushing myself. I've done a lot more with my life the last 5 years than I did the last 15 years before that. After I found out about Fanconi Anemia again, after I got the cancer, I mean, it's just a totally different ball game you're in suddenly. And I'm not trying to go out and save the world every day. And maybe I should if I was a better human being. I just try to be a little better, a little nicer to the people around me. I try to do these small things every now and then, and as often as possible, to make people around me more happy, make them feel better. I mean, I can be honest, I've had a lot of anger issues before. I have a big temperament, definitely. But over the last 5 years, and maybe even more so in the last year after I got my son, I've become a lot better at being like, just let go. It doesn't matter. Would I rather be right and be mad about something, or would I like to just see people around me being happy? I mean, does it really matter? I mean, if the bus is running late, it used to pisses me off so much. Now it's like, who cares? There'll be another one. I can spend the time here on my phone or calling a friend, or I just spend the time better instead of taking all these small confrontation every day.
Yeah, and I really think it helps put things, like, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it helps put things in perspective. It helps us kind of zoom way back and look at the world and see just how those things don't matter, how they're just minute little things, and we will ruminate over them, like you said, like the bus thing or something like that. We just ruminate over them for an hour or more, and that's an hour that we have just gave to that thought. And when you think about it, like from the broader scale, it's like unbelievable that we devote that much time to sitting in anger and like ruminating over something that small. And I mean, I'm saying because I do it too, but
I think it's human. We all do it, but I should say put it in perspective.
And I think us as individuals who live with a terminal illness, I think we teach people. We might not know it, and we might not really think about it, but we teach people about the fragility of life, and they almost look to us as a reflection of how one should be living their life, because they know that we have this. Not everybody, but people that are close to us know that we have this rare condition or rare disease that may inevitably cut our time shorter than other people's, and they know that we've been confronted with death much earlier than what they've probably been confronted, and they're almost looking to us as a reflection of how they might feel when they're faced with death, which they inevitably will. And that's why I think people find us so inspirational, because in that moment they can't imagine themselves dealing with it like we do, but it's because it's never happened to them. They can't really conceive that, but they look at us as someone that's living with these problems, and they just think it's spectacular because they can't imagine themselves living with something like what we have, the way that we do.
And I agree. I mean, if we can be an inspiration to other people, that's fantastic. I mean, then it serves a purpose. I am of the opinion that there's a reason for everything that happens in life. I know many people don't agree with that, and that's totally fine. I'm not going to get into big discussions online with people regarding that, but I believe that there's a reason for everything that happens. So, if something happens to me, I'm in this situation because I'm the type of person who can handle it, and I could use it to spread something positive. I mean, some people be like, oh, why does this happen to me? I haven't had that thought for so many years. I mean, why does it happen to me? Yeah. I definitely would be happy if I didn't have Fanconi Anemia, or I didn't have to deal with cancers. Of course I would. I would love that. But at the same time, I know I'm strong enough to handle this. And I'm strong enough to use it for something positive. So maybe that's why it's me and not somebody else. I mean,
and no, I was just going to say that I have similar sentiments, even though I mean there's some cases where there's some things that happen in life that are so terrible and so just not right that it's hard for me to put the label of them happening for a reason on them. I do believe everything happens, and it's about how we react to that. About how we react to that happening, or what happens and how we react to it. I think that's the very important part. And what separates people from other people is how they react to situations. But I guess it's hard for me to get on board with a reason, like maybe a reason, like cause and effect. But like for a divine purpose or divine reason. I don't. It's hard for me to believe that.
No, I
in
agree
some
with you. You're
instances.
regarding that. I'm not like into something divine or anything. But I just mean, if I look at it this way, when my mom died of cancer, it was terrible for me and my family. Of course it was. I mean, she was the one who really brought us all together. And to me and my dad and my brothers, it was a nightmare. But at the same time, after she passed away, we have gotten a lot closer than we ever was. I didn't have a very good relationship with my dad. I can say that now because I have a very, very good relationship with him today. I feel like he's almost one of my best friends, besides being my dad. But back then I didn't respect him a lot. And because it was always my mom who took care of everything. So I didn't really know who he was. I also have a older brother with some mental conditions. And I didn't really spend time with him. But after that, we start to taking care of each other on a whole different level. So even if I would prefer that it didn't happen to my mom, I still think it had some positive effects on our whole family. So that is what I mean. Even if something bad happens, something good can come out of it. And it usually does split something good, even though you sometimes have to look hard to find it.
Yes, and I believe in that too. I believe that tragedy can bring out the best in people, I guess. It brings out our best qualities during, tragic times, or in times when we have to really come together and rely on each other for support, because we realize that, it's essential that we do that for our well-being. Like just having to sit with some things by yourself, that is incredibly hard and can be incredibly damaging. But when you have people around you, that are going through a common tragedy, they can come together and they bring out the best qualities in each other. And I think that's also, there's a lot of terrible things that happen in people's lives. People die, young people die, children die, and it's hard to say it's hard to say everything happens for a reason, but a lot of times these tragedies, they teach us about like how fragile life is and how we need to be making the best out of our time, and how we also need to be really caring for other people, because when we experience a tragedy, we realize how emotionally difficult that is to go through. And if that happens to us, that probably happens to other people, and it is happening to other people. And we have to be here for each other to help at least try to comfort people in those times, because it happens. Everybody is going to face some type of tragedy.
Oh yeah.
And knowing what that feels like to go through something is very, really important, and understanding how important just us being there and, helping someone not feel so alone, how important that is.
So maybe the way you put it is a better way of explaining it. It's a better way than just saying everything happened for a reason. Yeah, I like your perspective on it. Yeah.
Yeah, the phrase could, it can be true, but it's associated with other things too that a lot of people think of when you say the phrase. So that's like right where their mind will go. And usually, people will put up their defenses when, they hear that. And I completely understand.
I understand that too, but yeah.
That's what, it took me a lot of words to explain how I feel about it. And I can't just come up with it. I guess if I were to say one phrase, it would just be everything happens. But yeah, it's about how we react to those situations and how we react in those times. But yeah.
That was food for thoughts. I like that. But I want to jump into the third part of this podcast. We're going to talk about happiness. And you have been listening to some of the other episodes. And happiness doesn't have to be like going on this wild, crazy 3-year trip where you visit every country in the world or anything. But what is happiness to you? How do you stay sane? How do you stay happy? What do you do to feel comfortable?
Really, I guess happiness to me is really living in the moment, is really feeling the ebbs and the flows of each moment. Is because when you're living in the moment, you completely forget about the past and the future. And a lot of times, the future is anxiety, and the past is like trauma. So a lot of times when we look back, sometimes there's good things embedded in the
Oh,
past.
that was a good way to put it, actually. Yeah.
And in the future, but a lot of times, we go back to visit those places for not so good things. So for me, living in like the moment, which isn't easy to just say that you just live in the moment. Like, no, it's not that easy. But
it's a learning process, definitely, to most of us.
And there's things that bring me to the moment, which was what I was gonna like music and riding my bike and things like that. They bring me into the moment. I shift my focus, and when I'm riding my bike, I'm thinking about, oh, where's the next turn? Where's the next, if I'm mountain biking, or when I'm doing music, I'm really in music. I actually, when I'm listening, I usually am. I am there. It's different from, I guess, listening to something recorded that someone puts on iTunes or Spotify than listening to something live. I think those are actually two different experiences, but they both can bring you into the present moment and, into your feelings, like feeling emotions as they come and feeling those emotions. Like when you have, a great song come through your ears and you get those chills, you're completely encapsulated by that moment. You're not thinking about, oh, what am I going to eat for dinner tomorrow? Like, you're not thinking about those things. You're completely encapsulated in the moment. And things like music, riding my bike, pictures. I do photography. So when I'm photographing somebody or in something in nature, like, I'm completely shifted into what that person, I almost completely forget I exist sometimes. I'm just focused on that person. And I'm, just almost, just looking at them and seeing them or kind of focused on my camera settings too, like what kind of depth of field do I want to use to create what I want people to see. And it's completely, it's removing me from those thoughts, those negative thoughts, that anxiety that kind of, encapsulate an individual from time to time. It's all about, how often are we in that anxious state? How often are we in that, looking towards the future and looking at it with anxiety? I think that really determines how, I guess, happy we are. I guess someone that's looking into the future often and looking at it with anxiety, they're probably not a very happy person. They're probably a very anxious person. But those who are doing things and, focused on their work or whatever. And this is when I mentioned earlier how some people run away from the thought of death, but sometimes it's not really running away. It's knowing, it's a conscious knowing that me doing this is going to make me remove myself from those thoughts. And it's not always a negative thing. So yeah, happiness to me, I guess, is living in the moment. That's where a lot of the happiness is found. And to be perpetually happy, I don't think is possible, and I don't think would be a very good life, just because I don't think we would appreciate happiness if we were happy all the time. We wouldn't understand how valuable it is and how much, we work to attain. It's not like, because I don't think happiness is something that we work to attain. Happiness is something that we can live with right now, that we can have right now. But we're thinking that in order to attain it, we have to have, some material object to bring us that happiness. And, most of the time when we achieve, we get that car, we get that house, or we get that thing that we think is going to bring us happiness, we realize, oh, that's all along. That's not really what gave me the happiness. But maybe it was the pursuit of getting that. Maybe it was the pursuit, was the state that I was existing in. So I think happiness is a state that we exist in from time to time. But I don't think it's something that is to be attained.
You can have a happy life without being happy all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
I look at it this way, because when I take an overview of my life, I live a pretty good life, I think. I'm happy most of the time, and I feel like I'm a happy human being. I'm positive. I have a lot of good things going on. I get to make this podcast. I make a Danish podcast too with gaming, which I love. I've done a lot of things that I really enjoy doing. But that does not mean that I'm running around smiling every day at every situation. And I mean, I have feelings like everybody else. I just try to have this minimum level of happiness in my life by being good to my wife, to my kids, to my dog, and have some good friendships with people. And if that's there, I mean, I don't have to run around laughing and trying to pretend to be happy all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, happiness can be many things. I actually think we have had some pretty good discussion also on this podcast with the different people about what is happiness to you. So when you mentioned this about music and stuff, I mean, when I have a good piece of music I want to listen to, and I have some different playlists depending on my mood, I love to be able to sit down, close my eyes, and listen to music. It just gets me on a whole different level. And it doesn't matter. Sometimes I want to have this sad feeling because it's healthy for me emotionally to deal with. And I do that through music a lot.
And I think you bring up a good point of us. Sometimes we kind of cherish our sadness. We respect our sadness in a way that we know that our sadness is going to bring us more happiness later on, just by the contrast that it's creating. But that, because I do the same thing. I listen to a lot of very sorrowful, indie rock or old indie rock and stuff like that when I'm in a bad mood or when I'm not feeling too good, because I'm also connecting with that music. I'm feeling me and that music's vibration or that music's energy is connecting. I feel much more closer to that state than if I were to throw on a really happy song. It would almost feel like it was mocking me. So I don't I agree with you. When I'm not, I almost find a pleasure in being sad. I don't really know how to explain it sometimes, but I'll listen to the music, the sadder, more sorrowful music, and I'll connect with it too. And
But for me, it's it's just a way to deal with it. I mean, when I put down my headphones, I'm almost back to normal again afterwards. But that 10 minutes or half an hour I spend on this music and letting my emotions take over, it's gold to me. I love it because then I get it out of my system. I mean, when we deal with a terminal disease, we lose people around us. We hear about people who's doing bad and terrible things happens to them. Even if they survive, it can be some really dire situations. And if I can't deal with that in my everyday life. I can't think about that every single day. So instead I take out these moments where I let myself feel the sorrow, be sad, thinking about these things, and just let go of the emotions.
Yeah, and I think that's a way to address our emotions, and because what happens when we push them away often, they usually come back tenfold. Allowing us that time to really kind of just sit and bask in our emotion and feel it out. It creates a release, like you're saying, how you feel so much better after listening to that music. So
there's only one thing that's better to me than music, and that is food. I love when I go out and get some really, really good food. And as far as I remember, wasn't you who loved this pho?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I remember
absolutely.
it correctly. You know, when you sit down, you get some really good stuff like that, and you take the first mouthful and just close your eyes and just taste it. Oh, man, that's living.
That's how my first experience with pho was like. Well, I was kind of amazed when I first, because I mean, not all pho is good. That's what I've realized. Eating all around the United States, different places, pho. Not all pho is great pho, but the first bowl of pho that I had was I was so surprised. I was like, what did I just taste. Like that tasted so good that I don't really believe my like what's going on in my taste buds. So I ate more, and I was getting the same feeling. And yeah, ever since then, pho has been like a staple for me. It's been something that I've reached. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel wholesome. It doesn't mess my stomach up a majority of the time. A few times it has, but that's because, I eat all around the United States, different bowls, and sometimes I just get something I probably shouldn't have ate. But it's a journey in itself, and that's something I also find solace in too, is traveling around and eating at these different places, these holes in the wall a lot of the time that I'm looking for, just because I love to be surprised.
Me and my wife, we usually try to travel a lot, and usually when I go to a new place, I never look for the food I know from home. I want to taste the local food. I want to taste new spices, different ways of doing things. I mean, if I'm going to the States, I want to eat what you're eating. If I'm going to Taiwan, I want to go down and get some really good street food. Things I have no clue what is. But if people is lining up together, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to go into that line. I'm going to taste it. I don't care what it is. I just need this experience. And to me, I love that.
That's how I feel too. But the thing in the States, like our normal food to me really isn't that good. So I'm looking for, pizza is good, but pizza isn't even, it wasn't born in America, but you know what I mean? I'm looking for other places where other cultures are existing, because, America is a big melting pot. I'm looking places where other cultures are existing, and then I can get a taste of that culture and what they're experiencing, pretty much every day probably. And that's just what amazes me is food is art. Like the way that they put together food, the way they're pairing spices, it's usually for a reason too, the way that they do things, different cultures do things. And you can learn a lot about a culture by the food that they eat. And that's something that I'm still interested in and may explore down the road, is going into different restaurants and hopefully being able to learn more about their culture from what they're eating, what they're cooking, how they make things. It's kind of already been done, with Anthony Bourdain and stuff like that, but it's so interesting. And I always feel pretty fulfilled after I have a good food experience. And if it's not, then I learned something.
Oh yeah, you can learn from that too. I think I used to say I only have one thing I don't eat at all, and that's curly flour. That is my kryptonite. That is.
What is it?
Cauliflower. That is my kryptonite. I can't.
Oh,
yeah, oh yeah. Oh.
Is that what it is? Cauliflower.
Yep.
But it's just said differently there. Okay. Yep.
That's.
I eat cauliflower, but mine's peanut butter because I'm allergic to it.
But that's a good reason.
Or peanuts, yeah.
To me, it's like I've been tasting things from all over the world, and it's the only thing I can think of that I find really utterly disgusting. I've tried some very weird stuff, like this 1,000-year egg or whatever it's called in Asia, where people are like, oh, it's so disgusting. It's like, it was good. It was not my favorite, but it was okay. I've tried worms. Yeah. Not something I will eat every day, I admit that. But it wasn't really terrible. It was like, okay, I've tried it.
Was it just a plain worm, or was it like seasoned?
It was seasoned, yeah.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if they just like, here's a worm.
No, it was just like a snack.
Being in Europe too, you're closer to like, the pure source of the food, of where different cultures are coming from. So
sometimes it's good, sometimes it's disappointing. We went to Rome last year, and I was like, I haven't been in Italy since I was a child, and I wanted to get a really good pizza. And I was so utterly disappointed. We went to 3 different places within that week, and we were so disappointed, both of us, when we were there. Me and my wife were like, okay, I could find better at home or in the US or in England. It was like, nah.
Dang, yeah, that would be disappointing, going right to the source like that. But also those places too, like I I mean, maybe they find it good, or maybe it's like a tourist area where they're like, okay, we're gonna cut down on, you know, the what we would usually do just because we know we're getting tourists to come here.
But I think it's also like we are used to a specific way of making pizzas. Mm-hmm. So it's not maybe the way they make it is of course the original, and I think most Italian will find it delicious. But now they like to keep it simple, and I enjoy that even. But I think it's just that I grew up, all of us in the Western world grew up with pizza no matter where we're from. So I have my palate of how it is supposed to taste. I mean, it tastes a lot of childhood memories. So when I get something in Italy and it's different, you know, yeah.
Yeah, because taste and smell is connected to our. We'll taste something and we'll, you know, go back to a certain time. And we'll be able to almost relive that for a second, like like Ratatouille.
Exactly. And sorry to everybody out there for going all foodie here, but I just remembered that you like pho, and we talked about it. I was like, yeah, we need to talk about this.
Oh yeah. I wish I could go to Vietnam and really get it there.
Oh yeah, food is happiness sometimes. But it's a good thing. You can eat under almost any circumstances. So that is a little part that you can enjoy no matter what happens.
And with going through my transplant, there was I did come to realize, and sometimes I forget about it, being able to eat and being able to actually taste food is almost like a privilege. We need to really cherish our ability to eat and be able to taste different foods, because there's some people that can't, you know, they can't eat. They're either fed through a feeding tube or maybe they can't taste foods. And it's something when I lost it, when I wasn't able to eat, that I realized how important it was to me to be able to eat. Was once I lost it, I was like, oh my goodness, eating is the best thing. Like food is the best thing ever because I didn't have it. I didn't know really what I had until I didn't have it. So
that is usually how it goes, actually, with a lot of things in life.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you one last question.
Okay.
Now you've been through a lot already, and we talked a little about what the future might hold and how you find happiness. When you got your bone marrow transplantation, you were in the start 20s? Isn't that right?
22.
22.
Yep, I was 22 when I had my transplant. Yeah.
You are what people consider a young man. I'm the old dude, okay? You're the young man. So what advice would you give to other young people in your situation? They don't have to have Fanconi Anemia, but, you know, who deal with some kind of terminal disease or chronic disorder. And, you know, for a lot of people, I hear it's a lot of people have some problem with dealing with this, about being young, and now in reality you should be out doing like what your peers does, but suddenly you have to deal with this. What advice could you give some of the young people? And maybe that's just me. I see you as a very strong person because the way you are dealing with all this, I mean, you're doing good. Everything considered. In conjunction to my situation and the things I've been to, I guess I am doing pretty good. But yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's also a really tough question, because I have found my own ways to live and to move through things and move through life. And it's hard for me to tell people like, oh, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. And yeah, that is a hard question. But there's a few things that I've learned that I think have been instrumental in kind of getting me to where I am now, I guess. And that one thing is uncertainty. Well, I guess here's what the phrase is that the only thing that's certain is uncertainty. And that's something that I really have grasped onto, because I've had so many things that are against the odds happen to me. Against, oh, that shouldn't happen because that's rare, or that shouldn't happen because, that usually doesn't happen. So many things that have happened to me that, usually wouldn't happen to a normal person, or what they would say would normally happen. And I have really learned that
uncertainty is what really gives our life flavor, I guess. It's not knowing what's going to happen next, but kind of being excited about it, because we are in this story, like we are in this, I guess, book kind of. And I mean, we're not really the authors, because a lot of things are happening to us and we are reacting. So a lot of times we're not writing out every single detail, but we do have control how we react to things and how we react to those uncertain things. And to me, like that uncertainty is kind of exciting. We wouldn't, I guess, comparing life to a book, if we knew the end, if we knew the end of our own book, we knew how exactly it was going to end. We knew the pages leading up to and everything. I think that, we would probably not be very happy with that. We don't want to read a book that we already know the ending to. We usually, if we know the ending, we're like, oh, it's not worth reading. Oh, yeah. So I guess just kind of being willing to accept, a lot of uncertainty that is going to happen to us, but embrace that uncertainty to really be excited about the future and what's going to happen, no matter what it is, because we're in control of how we react to those situations. And we're going to experience... That's a good way to put it, yeah. We are going to experience sadness. We are going to experience happiness. We're going to experience all the emotions. And I think once we accept that, we kind of... we can appreciate everything that's happened to us, even if it's bad, which is hard to tell somebody that maybe just went through something really bad. But, you're going to experience happiness again on a certain level. And don't be ashamed to experience that happiness if you just went through something really bad. Some people think that, maybe they shouldn't be experiencing happiness because they have just went through something so tragic or something bad has happened to someone that they love. Don't feel ashamed to, feel that happiness, because that's what's we're supposed to be feeling happiness. We're supposed to be feeling sadness. We're supposed to be feeling all the emotions. So I guess that'd be my advice, is just to roll, as some would say, like to roll with the punches, to roll with the things that are being thrown at you and just keep going on, because bad things are going to happen to you. Good things are going to happen to you. Many things are going to happen to you.
I mean, in reality, it will happen if it happens. The only difference is how you look upon it and how you react to what's happening. Yeah.
And don't compare your situation to other people's situations too much. I mean, since I even heard this in the last podcast, that, as humans, we naturally kind of try to analyze things and compare ourselves to other people. And we're always going to do that. But don't get some expectation that, life is going to turn out this way or something's going to happen. Don't have that expectation. Don't expect it to happen. Because ultimately, expectation and not meeting those expectations, that leads to letdown. Like we'll be let down if we don't achieve like what we thought we were going to achieve, or this doesn't happen to us because that happened to somebody else. That should be happening to us. No, that's an unrealistic expectation. And, we're probably not going to meet those expectations, but we do, like you said, we do control like how we react to a situation, how we feel about a situation. But comparing ourselves to others and different things is going to lead to a lot of letdown. I know we naturally do it, but, expecting something to happen, that a lot of times it leads to us, being let down or feeling that we weren't good enough.
And usually,
when reality is just different.
Real life can live up to our expectations, even if it's good or bad. I mean, we always build it worse or better in our heads anyway. So,
and I like some people like to look at life as a fight, which I've heard a lot, looking at, we're fighting this disease, or we're fighting for freedom. And it's applicable in some situations. In my situation, I don't think it's, as applicable. I see myself more so dancing with my illness than fighting with it. It's me rolling with, doing the certain steps to help ease into certain situations, but not fighting something, because Fanconi Anemia, is a part of me. It's ingrained in my DNA. It's a part of, it might not be who I am, but it's definitely part of it. It definitely has affected me in a way that has changed the course of my life. And I have to acknowledge it for doing that, and bringing good and bad things into my life.
That's a very interesting way to look at it, actually.
Yeah, and it's something that I can't fight. And actually, I got the sentiment towards living with FA from a well-known person that lived with FA, Amy Fronmeyer. She was really the essence of what I felt like this was. She was, a person that would walk into a room really and just light up a room because she was so, she radiated like peace and, warmthness. And she looked at life more in living with FA as a dance than a fight. I think that she has a quote where it goes, "I owe it to myself and this world to pursue with all my heart the things I can do to make this life beautiful. I will never be able to control all of the music. I am simply learning how to dance this life with a little more grace." And
beautiful put, yeah.
And that's her direct quote. And all the stuff that she had lived through, losing her two sisters, had to be incredibly hard. But she was still learning how to live with life and how she explained it, dance with it, which I absolutely love. That she looked at it that way and she explained it that way instead of a fight.
I love that way of thinking about it. Kyle, it has been such a pleasure having you here. Why haven't we done this before?
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, and I wanted to be on this podcast because I was like, this is the podcast that I want to be on, and that, yeah. And I loved all the people that you have brought on, and I've loved hearing their stories, and I think it's so important what you're doing right now.
Thank you so much, and I hope we can bring many more people up. But I've really been looking forward to this, to hear your side of the story, hear you tell about what you've been through, because I do think that everybody can learn from this, and I hope they do.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thank you so much for joining, and to everybody out there, remember to like this or give us a good review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this podcast from. It really helps us a lot reaching more viewers, because then we're getting higher up on the scales, and it's easier for people to find the podcast. So we would very much appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining me, and everybody out there, see you soon again. In 14 days, we'll be back with a new episode. Take care.
Peace be the journey.
Thank you for listening to tonight's episode of Life, Death and Happiness. If you like this, please do us a big favor and head over to iTunes, Overcast, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast from, and subscribe to us. If you also give us a good rating, it will help us a lot reaching much more people, so I will appreciate that a lot too. Also, you can of course follow us on Facebook and Twitter and help us spread the word through there. My name is Daniel, and thank you so much for listening.